I want to start by asking about communications technology and how it relates to social change. Is there something fundamentally different about how social changes happen in an age of this mass communication versus how it's happened historically?
Yeah, I think that's one of the more important questions to ask because it sort of tells whether or not the technologies are shaping the potential for society. The very first big discovery, this is by Lazarsfeld and Katz, and they were doing originally the study of voting behavior. This is back in 44 and 48, and looking at the way in which advertisements on radio actually influenced people's discussions and their choice about which candidate to vote for. And the subtle inference that they made that no one else expected was actually what was happening was radio signals were going out, they were hitting the population, but it wasn't as if it was kind of this blanket covering where everyone was getting the radio signal directly and then changing their decision but based on it. More so, it was that the radio signal was going out and that there were a small number of people who were pretty attuned to that sort of mass broadcast. And then those people were acting as kind of dissemination agents into the population. And that is like the latter day term for that is influencer, right?
Yep.
Is like the person who's sort of responsible for then influencing large amounts of others. What happened though between then and now was this sort of understanding that once, either a media machine or the person who mediates it, the opinion leader, starts communicating with people on the network, the pattern of relationships among friends and friends of friends in that network can have different shapes, different geometries. And the geometry of that network actually determines how far some kind of new idea or some influence process spreads, and whether it keeps cascading level upon level, layer upon layer, deeper and deeper to the network, or whether it kind of just hits a few people and stops. Mm-hmm. People tend to know a small cluster of folks really well. And the people that you know really well, your trusted, sort of intimate, strong ties, also tend to know each other because you're all interacting in the same spaces. And so that cluster of people has a lot of little triangles in it of I know you, you know me, friends of friends know each other. But there's this occasional person that's not really connected to your friendship or family group. And that person maybe travels in occasionally, or you know them from some previous setting, or maybe you've met them in a conference. And that person is a weak tie because you're not very close to each other. That person is also, socially speaking, very far away. They live in a different social cluster. They have totally different friends, different information, different experiences. And so that person is in a position to transmit information across a very far social distance just through that one interaction. So even though it's a weak relationship, it's strong in terms of like the structural pattern of ties in the US. And so if you want to look for like what kinds of ties are going to allow us to jump from group to group to group and get 6 degrees of separation, it's probably going to be this sequence of weak ties. That became kind of a very deep insight, and it built in some ways upon the classic idea of the opinion leader, which is that the opinion leader is also someone who's going to know lots of different people. And so some of the people they know will be strong ties, but a lot of the people they know will be weak ties. They'll have like this vast array of network connections. And then we can imagine that in the way of the modern influencer, which is someone who has like maybe 1 million ties on a social media network, and they don't really know any of those people. And so the idea that like these ties that don't mean a lot to us personally, but kind of reach out in all directions are the key conduits for transmission of ideas and behaviors. That's an intuition that's been around now for half a century, and it lives large in our imagination and in our media marketing strategies and our political strategies. This was certainly a strategy they used to try to up vaccination levels in the conservative community. They got high profile media influencers, Dolly Parton, to like get vaccinated. And the point is that every attempt to use that strategy of the high powered, highly connected, weak tie influencer is always inconsistently ineffective when it comes to any kind of social change process. It works great for selling coconut water. Kim Kardashian can sell lots of coconut water. But when it comes to saying, hey, why don't you change your values around vaccination? What winds up happening, something really interesting, which is that not only does it not work, but that person actually loses status as an influencer because social norms are not that easily shifted. And people who have them actually wind up pushing back and saying, wait a minute, maybe you're not a member of our community, even though you're so high profile, because we don't believe that. And so the question is, and this is sort of the big punchline is, well, okay, if all of that knowledge from, now we're talking about 75 years of serious science by famous people leads us to a conclusion that not only doesn't work, but backfires, where are we, in terms of the science? And this is where my work really picks up. And every single one of these sort of behavior change technologies or movements or social change campaigns spread by taking hold not in the center of the network, not with highly connected people, but actually taking hold in the periphery of the network where people are much less connected and their connections tend to be embedded in these strong tie networks.